The message came at midnight, Earth time. Commander Daniel Cole was standing alone on the observation deck of Orbital Station 7 when his communicator beeped. He looked down at the small screen and felt his blood run cold. It was a distress call from the... Daniel had never met an in person, but like every human alive, he knew their story. 40 years ago, humanity had been dying. A plague had swept across Earth, killing millions every week. The hospitals were full. The morgues were overflowing. Scientists worked day and night but found no cure. The human race was facing extinction. Then they came. They appeared in Earth's sky without warning, their beautiful crystalline ships glowing like stars. They were strange beings made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. They had no mouths, no eyes, no faces. They communicated through vibrations in their bodies, and they had come to help. They shared their medical technology freely. They asked for nothing in return. They simply said that all life was precious and that they could not watch another species die. Within 6 months, the plague was cured. 3 billion humans who would have died were saved. They never asked humanity to repay them. They did not believe in debts, but humanity remembered. Every child learned the story in school. Every family told the tale at dinner tables. They had saved them when no one else would, and humans would never forget. Now, as Daniel read the message on his screen, he understood that the time to repay that kindness had finally come. He walked quickly to the communication center, his boots echoing on the metal floor. The station was quiet at this hour. Most of the crew was sleeping, but Daniel knew that sleep would be impossible for him tonight. The communication officer on duty was a young woman named Laura Griffin. She had red hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. When she saw Daniel's face, she sat up straight in her chair. "Commander, what's wrong?" she asked. "Open a channel to Earth Command," Daniel said. "Priority 1, and pull up everything we have on the Dominion." Laura's fingers moved across her console. A moment later, a holographic image appeared in the air above her desk. It showed a map of the galaxy with a large section colored in red. Though Laura said quietly, "They're bad news, sir." Daniel nodded. He had studied the reports. They were conquerors. They came from the far edge of the galaxy, and they had been expanding their empire for centuries. They had conquered 62 different species. Some they enslaved, others they simply destroyed. They saw the universe as a collection of resources waiting to be taken, and they took without mercy. The Galactic conquered, the peaceful alliance that included Earth and the had tried to negotiate with them. They had responded by executing the diplomats and sending their heads back in a box. "They have declared war on the conquered," Daniel said. "Their fleet is heading for space. They'll reach Prime in 3 months." Laura's face went pale. Prime was it was a beautiful planet of crystal forests and singing mountains, home to 4 billion gentle beings who had never known war. "Sir, they don't have a military," Laura said. "They don't even have weapons. They've been peaceful for 10,000 years." "I know," Daniel said. "The other conquered species can't help. They are too far away. They have medical ships, not warships. They will slaughter them." "I know," Daniel said again. Laura looked at him with something like hope in her eyes. "What are we going to do?" Daniel thought about his grandfather. The old man had been a soldier in Earth's last great war, before humanity had reached the stars. He used to tell Daniel stories about what humans were capable of when they had something worth fighting for. He used to say that humans were different from other creatures. They were born on a world that tried to kill them every day. They had survived ice ages and famines and plagues and wars. They had climbed to the top of the food chain on a planet filled with predators. They had earned their place in the universe through blood and pain and stubborn refusal to die. The other species in the galaxy did not understand this. They had evolved on gentle worlds with stable climates and plenty of food. They had never needed to fight for survival. They looked at humans and saw primitive creatures with violent histories. They did not understand that this violence was not a weakness. It was a strength. "We're going to help them," Daniel said. Laura stared at him. "Sir, our fleet is small. They have over 1,000 ships. We'd be outnumbered 4-1, maybe more." "I know the numbers," Daniel said. "They don't matter." "How can they not matter?" Daniel smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It was the smile of a predator, the smile of something that had learned to hunt in the dark. "They have conquered 62 species," he said. "Do you know what all those species have in common? They all came from safe worlds. Worlds without hurricanes or earthquakes or volcanoes. Worlds without predators that could rip you apart. Worlds where the weather didn't try to freeze you or burn you or drown you." He leaned closer to Laura, and his voice dropped to something hard and cold. "They have never fought anything from a. They've never fought anything that grew up knowing that every day could be its last. They've never fought humans." Laura swallowed hard. She had grown up on Earth, in a small town in Colorado. She remembered the winters that could kill an unprepared person in hours. She remembered the summer storms that could spawn tornadoes without warning. She remembered learning to swim in rivers with currents strong enough to drag you under. She had thought those things were normal. It was only after she joined the fleet and met beings from other worlds that she understood how different Earth really was. "You really think we can win?" she asked. "I think we owe the everything," Daniel said, "and I think it's time to pay our debt." He turned back to the communication console. The screen was flashing, indicating that Earth Command was ready to receive his call. "Get me Admiral Price," he said. "Tell her they need us. Tell her it's time to show the galaxy what can do." Laura nodded and opened the channel. As she worked, Daniel looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the fleet was moving toward the. They thought they were going to find easy prey. They thought they were going to win another quick victory. They were wrong. The debt was about to be paid, and humanity always paid its debts in full. Admiral Price had spent 40 years lying to the galaxy. She had smiled at diplomatic meetings and assured nervous aliens that humans were civilized now. She had explained that Earth's violent history was in the past. She had promised that humanity had evolved beyond its primitive nature. It had all been necessary. When humans first joined the Galactic Concord, the other species had been afraid of them. They had read the reports about Earth and its dangers. They had learned about the wars that had killed millions. They had studied the predators that hunted in Earth's jungles and oceans. And they had looked at humans with their forward-facing eyes and their sharp teeth and their bodies built for running and fighting, and they had seen monsters. Had worked hard to change that image. She had turned the human fleet into a peacekeeping force. She had sent aid missions to struggling worlds. She had made humanity look helpful and harmless and safe. But she had never forgotten what humans really were. Now, sitting in the war room of the carrier Relentless, she was done pretending. The room was full of her senior officers. Captain Torres, her chief strategist, stood at the holographic display showing the enemy fleet. Colonel Bell, the commander of the Marine Forces, sat with his arms crossed over his massive chest. Lieutenant Commander Kate, head of engineering, studied a tablet showing supply reports. They were the best officers in the fleet, and they all knew why they had been called here. "The fleet numbers over 1,000 ships," Torres said, pointing at the display. "We can field 240 if we pull every vessel we have. That includes patrol ships, cargo escorts, everything." "What about the other conquered species?" asked. "They are sending supply ships. They have offered their medical frigates, but none of them can fight. They don't have weapons. They don't have soldiers. They don't even understand the concept of war." Nodded slowly. She had expected this. The other species in the Concord had evolved on peaceful worlds. They had never needed to develop weapons or military tactics. When they faced conflict, they negotiated or surrendered. The idea of fighting to the death was alien to them. But not to humans. "What about our ground forces?" she asked. Colonel Bell stood up. He was a big man with scars on his face and hands that had seen real combat. He had trained in the worst places on Earth before joining the fleet. He knew what humans were capable of. "We can deploy 50,000 Marines within the week," he said. "Another 100,000 if we activate the reserves. They're ready to fight, Admiral. They've been waiting for something like this." Torres shook his head. "The numbers still don't work. Even with every ship and every soldier we have, we're badly outnumbered. The use swarm tactics. They overwhelm their enemies with pure numbers. Every species they've faced has been crushed." "Every species they've faced has been from a safe world," said quietly. "Every species they've faced has given up when the odds turned against them. That's what rational creatures do. They calculate the cost of fighting versus the cost of surrender, and they make the logical choice." She stood up and walked to the holographic display. The red markers representing the fleet filled the screen like a swarm of angry insects. "Humans are not rational creatures," she continued. "We are survivors. We come from a world where the weather kills, where the animals hunt, where even the plants can poison you. We evolved to fight, to endure, to never give up no matter how bad things get. That's not a weakness. That's our greatest strength." Torres looked uncertain. "Admiral, I believe in our soldiers, but believing doesn't change mathematics. We cannot win a straight fight against those numbers." Smiled. It was a cold smile, the kind that made the aliens at diplomatic meetings uncomfortable. "Then we won't fight straight," she said. "We'll fight like humans." She pressed a button on the console, and the display changed. Now it showed a series of tactical plans marked with codes that most of the officers had never seen before. "This is Protocol Omega," said. "It was developed in secret by Earth Command 20 years ago. The Conquered doesn't know it exists. It's designed for exactly this situation, when humanity faces an enemy we cannot defeat through conventional means." Kate leaned forward, her eyes scanning the plans. "These tactics are unconventional, Admiral. Some of them are almost primitive." "That's the point. They have conquered 62 species. They've learned to counter advanced technology and sophisticated strategies. They've never seen anything like this." Pointed at one section of the plan. "Guerrilla warfare, ambushes, traps, hit-and-run attacks, psychological operations. These are tactics that humans invented thousands of years ago, and we've been perfecting them ever since." Colonel Bell grinned. It was not a friendly expression. "I trained my Marines in survival combat on Earth. We learned to fight in jungles and deserts and mountains. We learned to kill with rocks and sticks when our weapons failed. We learned to keep fighting when we were wounded and exhausted and outnumbered." He cracked his knuckles. "They have no idea what's coming." Torres still looked worried. "Admiral, even if these tactics work, we'll take heavy casualties. The cost in lives could be enormous." Was silent for a long moment. She thought about the soldiers she would send into battle, the young men and women who would fight and bleed and die. She thought about their families back on Earth, waiting for news that might never come. She thought about the weight of the decision she was making. Then she thought about the crystalline beings who had crossed the galaxy to save humanity when no one else would. She thought about the 4 billion peaceful souls on Prime who had never known war and would be slaughtered if no one helped them. "They saved 3 billion human lives," she said softly. "They asked for nothing in return. They simply gave us the gift of survival because they believed all life was precious." She looked at each of her officers in turn. "Now they face extinction, and we are the only ones who can help them. If we don't fight, they die. All of them. Every last one." She straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. "Contact Earth Command. Tell them Protocol Omega is active. Tell them to mobilize every soldier, every ship, every resource we have. We leave for Prime in 48 hours." The officers saluted and began to move. Torres hesitated at the door. "Admiral," he said, "what do I tell the troops? What do I say to make them understand why we're doing this?" Looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there they were waiting, hoping that their old friends would come to help them. They had no idea what humans were truly capable of. They had no idea what was about to be unleashed. "Tell them the truth," she said. "Tell them that 40 years ago, strangers from the stars saved our species. Tell them that those strangers are now in danger, and it's our turn to save them. Tell them that humans remember their debts, and we always pay them back." She turned to face Tors, and her eyes were hard as stone. "Tell them we pay our debts in fire. Human fleet arrived at Prime 3 weeks before the enemy. What they did in those 3 weeks would change the galaxy forever." Daniel Cole stood on the surface of and looked around at the crystal forests. The trees were made of living mineral, their branches reaching toward the sky like frozen lightning. They hummed softly in the wind, creating music that seemed to come from the planet itself. It was the most beautiful place Daniel had ever seen. It was about to become a battlefield. They gathered around the human soldiers with confusion in their glowing bodies. They had never seen weapons before. They had never seen armor or helmets or combat boots. They watched as humans unloaded crates of supplies and started digging holes in their perfect crystal gardens. Ambassador approached Daniel. He was tall and thin, his body made of pale blue crystal that pulsed with gentle light. He had no face, but Daniel could sense his distress through the vibrations he produced. "Commander Cole," said, his voice like wind chimes, "we do not understand what you are doing. Why are you destroying our gardens? Why are you digging in our soil?" Daniel knelt down so he could be closer to the ambassador's level. He had learned that found this gesture comforting. "We're building defenses," he explained. "Bunkers where your people can hide during the fighting, trenches where our soldiers can take cover, walls that will slow down the enemy. But our gardens have stood for thousands of years. They are sacred to us." Daniel felt a pain in his chest. He understood what he was asking them to sacrifice, but he also knew what would happen if they didn't prepare. "Ambassador, I'm sorry. Truly I am. But they are coming and they will not care about your gardens. They will burn them anyway. At least this way your people might survive." Was silent for a long moment. Then he made a sound that Daniel had learned to recognize as a sigh. "You humans are so strange," he said. "You destroy in order to protect. You cause pain in order to prevent pain. We do not understand your ways." "I know," Daniel said, "but our ways have kept us alive for a very long time, and now they might keep you alive too." Across the planet, similar scenes were playing out. Lieutenant Commander Kate led the engineering teams in building fortifications around the major cities. She worked 18-hour days, sleeping in short bursts whenever she could. Her hands were cut and bruised from handling construction materials, but she never complained. "Faster," she told her teams. "We need to finish before the enemy arrives. Every wall we build is another chance for someone to survive." They tried to help, but they didn't understand the work. They had never built anything meant to withstand attack. Their buildings were beautiful but fragile, designed for peace and harmony. Kate had to teach them everything from the beginning. "You need thicker walls," she explained to a group of workers. "See how thin this is? A plasma blast would go right through it. We need to add reinforcement here and here and here." They listened and learned. They were intelligent beings, and once they understood the purpose, they worked hard. But Kate could see the sadness in their glowing bodies as they transformed their beautiful world into a fortress. Meanwhile, in orbit, Admiral Price deployed her fleet in a pattern that confused everyone who saw it. Captain Tors studied the formation on his screen and shook his head. "Admiral, this doesn't look like any defensive formation I've ever seen. The ships are scattered all over the system. There's no concentrated fire point, no defensive line." "Exactly," said. "They have fought 62 species. They've seen every conventional formation. They know how to counter them, so we're not going to use conventional formations." She pointed at the display, showing where each ship was hidden. "See those asteroid clusters? We have destroyers hiding behind them, powered down to avoid detection. Those gas clouds. Our frigates are inside them, using the interference to mask their signatures. Every moon, every piece of debris, every shadow in this system has human ships waiting inside it. Tors was beginning to understand. We're not forming a defensive line, we're setting up an ambush. Not just one ambush, dozens of them, hundreds. They will enter this system expecting a straight fight. Instead, they'll be attacked from every direction at once. They won't know where to focus their fire. They won't know how many ships we have. They'll be confused and scared, and that's when we'll hit them hardest. On the surface, Sergeant Amy prepared her own surprises. She was a Marine sniper, one of the best in the fleet. She had grown up hunting deer in the forests of Montana, and she had learned patience before she learned to talk. Now she used that patience to prepare the deadliest welcome they would ever receive. "Dig the pits deeper," she told her squad. "They are big. We need to make sure they can't climb out." Private Hill looked at the pit they were digging and frowned. "Sarge, this seems kind of primitive. Don't we have better weapons than holes in the ground?" Amy smiled at him. It was not a kind smile. "They have shields that can stop plasma bolts. They have armor that can resist laser fire. They have sensors that can detect our advanced weapons from miles away." She pointed at the pit. "But they don't have sensors that detect holes in the ground. They don't have shields that stop sharpened sticks. They've been fighting high-tech wars for centuries, and they've forgotten that sometimes the old ways are the best ways." She pulled out a knife and began sharpening a wooden stake. "On Earth, our ancestors used traps like this to hunt animals 10 times their size. They used ambushes and tricks and patience to bring down creatures that should have killed them. That's how humans survived. Not by being stronger or faster, but by being smarter and more stubborn than anything else on the planet." Watched her work and slowly began to understand. "So we're going to hunt them," he said, "like they're animals." "They think they're the predators," Amy said. "They think we're the prey. They're about to learn how wrong they are." The days passed quickly. The humans worked without rest, building and preparing and planning. They watched and helped where they could, their beautiful world transforming into something hard and dangerous. Ambassador visited Daniel on the last night before the enemy was due to arrive. He found the human commander standing alone on a hill, looking up at the stars. Commander Cole said, "I wanted to thank you. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that my people are grateful. You came to help us when no one else would." Daniel turned to face him. His eyes were tired, but his jaw was set with determination. "40 years ago you saved my species," he said. "You asked for nothing in return. You just helped us because it was the right thing to do." He looked back up at the stars, where the fleet was getting closer with every passing minute. "Now it's our turn. And I promise you, Ambassador, we will make them pay for every inch of ground they try to take." The crystal ambassador pulsed with soft light. "I believe you," he said. "For the first time since this started, I believe we might survive." Daniel nodded slowly. "We'll do more than survive," he said. "We'll win." Above them, the stars began to move. They had arrived. The Supreme Commander, Archon, watched his fleet enter the system with absolute confidence. He had conquered dozens of worlds. He had crushed species that thought themselves powerful. There were peaceful fools who would fall like all the others. His sensors showed a small human fleet scattered across the system. He laughed when he saw the numbers. 200 ships against his 1,000. It was almost insulting. "The humans came to die for their friends," he said to his officers. "How touching, how pointless, destroy them." The fleet moved forward in perfect formation, a wall of warships that had never known defeat. They expected the humans to form a defensive line. They expected the usual pattern of battle, where the weaker force tried to hold position until it was overwhelmed. Instead, the humans disappeared. One moment, the human ships were visible on the sensors. The next moment, they were gone, scattered into the asteroid fields and gas clouds and shadow zones throughout the system. Find them. They cannot have gone far. His sensors searched, but the human ships had powered down their engines. They drifted like dead stones among the asteroids, invisible and waiting. Then the first explosion happened. A destroyer at the edge of the formation suddenly burst into flames. Then another. Then three more. The humans had planted mines throughout the asteroid field, simple but deadly devices that the sensors had not thought to look for. Snarled, evasive action, move away from the asteroids. His fleet changed course, moving toward clear space. But there was no clear space. Everywhere they turned, they found more traps, mines hidden in debris, bombs attached to dead satellites, explosive devices floating in the darkness like sleeping predators. And then the human ships attacked. They came out of nowhere, rising from behind moons and asteroids with weapons blazing. They struck fast and hard, targeting the weak points in the formation. They did not try to win through firepower. They hit, they hurt, and they vanished before the enemy could respond. Admiral Price watched the battle from her command ship, the Relentless. Her eyes were cold and focused as she directed her forces. Eagle Squadron hit their supply ships. Wolf Squadron target the command vessel's communications, make them blind and hungry. The human ships obeyed. They moved like predators, working together to isolate and destroy their prey. They knew they could not win a straight fight, so they did not fight straight. They fought dirty. On the surface of Prime, the ground battle was even worse. The landing ships descended through the atmosphere, carrying thousands of soldiers in heavy armor. They expected the usual easy conquest. They expected terrified civilians and weak resistance. They found hell. Sergeant Amy watched through her scope as the first soldiers stepped off their ships. They were big, almost 3 meters tall, with thick gray skin and 4 arms that ended in sharp claws. Their armor was advanced, covered in shields that could stop plasma fire. But shields could not stop a pit trap. The first squad marched forward in perfect formation. They stepped onto what looked like solid ground. It was not solid. The covering collapsed, and they fell into a pit filled with sharpened stakes coated in poison from Earth's most deadly plants. The screaming started immediately. "Now," Amy said into her communicator. All around the landing zone, hidden human soldiers opened fire. They aimed for the gaps in the armor, the joints and seams that shields could not fully protect. They used weapons that the enemy had never seen before, simple projectile guns that fired metal bullets at incredible speeds. They had shields against energy weapons. They had no shields against flying metal. Private Hill fought in the streets of Incity. The crystal buildings shattered around him as plasma fire tore through the air. He had been shot twice already, once in the arm and once in the leg. The pain was incredible, but he did not stop. On Earth, he had learned that pain was just information. It told you that something was wrong, but it did not force you to quit. You could choose to keep going. You could choose to fight through it, and chose to fight. He rounded a corner and found 3 soldiers advancing toward a shelter full of civilians. The aliens were huddled together, their crystal bodies trembling with fear. They had never seen violence before. They did not understand what was happening. Understood. He raised his rifle and fired. The first fell with a hole in its neck. The second turned toward him and he put 2 rounds through its eye. The third charged at him, claws extended, and met it head-on. They crashed together, human and alien, rolling across the crystal floor. That was stronger. It pinned down and raised its claws to strike. Pulled the pin on a grenade. The explosion killed them both. In orbit, Commander Daniel Cole led a boarding party against a carrier. His team had breached the ship through an exhaust port, crawling through pipes filled with toxic gases that would have killed any other species in minutes. Humans just held their breath and kept moving. They emerged inside the ship and began fighting their way toward the bridge. The corridors were narrow, designed for beings much larger than humans. This was supposed to be an advantage for the defenders. It was not. Daniel had trained his team in close-quarters combat. They used the tight spaces to negate the enemy's size advantage. They moved fast and low, striking at knees and throats, using knives when their guns ran out of ammunition. They fought back hard. They were warriors bred for combat, armed with the best weapons their empire could provide. But they had never fought anything like this. They had never fought creatures that did not know how to surrender. Daniel took a plasma bolt to the chest. His armor absorbed most of the impact, but the force threw him against a wall. He felt ribs crack. Blood filled his mouth. He stood up and kept fighting. The battle raged for 3 days. 3 days of constant combat, of explosions and screaming and death. The humans took terrible losses. Ships were destroyed. Soldiers were killed. The cost was higher than anyone had predicted. But the humans did not stop. On the 3rd day, Admiral Price made her final move. The Relentless had been damaged badly, its engines failing and its weapons running low on power, but it was still moving. She aimed her crippled ship at the command vessel. "All hands abandon ship," she ordered. "Get to the escape pods now." Her crew obeyed, fleeing to safety as she stayed at the helm. She guided the Relentless through the enemy fire, taking hit after hit, refusing to change course. At the last moment, she launched the boarding pods. They struck the enemy command vessel at close range, punching through the shields that could not stop physical objects. Marines poured out, led by Colonel Bell. They fought their way to the command bridge. They found Archon waiting for them, surrounded by his guards. "What are you?" the Archon demanded, his voice filled with confusion and fear. Bell smiled, blood dripping from a wound on his forehead. "We are humans," he said, "and you made a terrible mistake." The guards attacked. They died quickly. Was captured alive. The fleet, seeing their commander fall, began to break apart. Some ships fled, others surrendered. The battle was over. Humanity had won. The silence after the battle was almost as terrible as the fighting itself. The system was filled with wreckage, the broken bodies of ships floating through space like dead leaves. On the surface, the crystal cities were and burned, their beautiful towers cracked and stained with blood. But they were alive. 4 billion of them had survived because a species they barely understood had come to fight for them. Admiral Price stood on the observation deck of a borrowed ship, watching the cleanup efforts. The Relentless was gone, destroyed in her final charge against the enemy command vessel. Over 100 of her crew had died with the ship. She had known many of them by name. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Captain Torres approaching. "The final count is in," he said quietly. "We lost 93 ships, 42,000 soldiers dead on the ground, another 8,000 wounded." He paused, his voice tight with emotion. "It's the worst losses humanity has ever suffered in a single battle." Nodded slowly. She had known the cost would be high. She had made the decision anyway. "And though," she asked. "Over 600 ships destroyed or captured. Their ground forces were almost completely wiped out. Intelligence says this was their main battle fleet. They won't be able to threaten anyone for years, maybe decades." Torres looked at her with something like wonder. "Admiral, we didn't just win. We broke them." Did not smile. She was thinking about the families back on Earth who would receive notices telling them their sons and daughters were not coming home. She was thinking about the empty seats at dinner tables, the photographs that would hang on walls, the grief that would last for generations. "We paid a heavy price," she said. "We paid what was owed," Torres replied. The next day received a request that surprised her. Archon, the captured commander, wanted to speak with her. She agreed. They met in a secure room aboard the orbital station. The Archon was restrained, his 4 arms locked in heavy chains. He looked smaller than she expected, diminished by defeat. "You asked to see me," said. "Why?" Was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, His voice was hollow with something she had never expected to hear from a confusion. "I have been a warrior for 200 years," he said. "I have conquered worlds without number. I have fought against species of every kind. I thought I understood what war was." He looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. "I did not understand anything." Sat down across from him. "What do you mean?" "The other species we conquered, they fought when they thought they could win. When they realized they could not win, they surrendered. This is logical. This is rational. This is how intelligent beings behave." He shook his head slowly. "But your people do not behave this way. Your people fight when there is no hope. Your people die rather than give up. Your people keep attacking even when they are wounded and broken and outnumbered." He leaned forward, his chains rattling. "I watched one of your soldiers charge into a group of mine with explosives strapped to his body. He knew he would die. He did it anyway. Why? What could possibly make someone do that?" Thought about Hill. She had read the report of his death, how he had sacrificed himself to save a shelter full of civilians. He had been 23 years old. "We call it courage," she said, "but I think it's something deeper than that. It's love. Love for our friends, love for our families, love for people we've never met but who we know deserve to live." She looked at the Archon with hard eyes. "They saved us once. They didn't ask for payment. They didn't demand anything in return. They just helped us because it was right. That kind of kindness creates a debt that logic cannot measure. It can only be paid with sacrifice." Seemed to shrink into himself. "We have never known such things," he said. "We conquered because we could. We destroyed because it was efficient. We never imagined that weakness could inspire strength, that kindness could create warriors." "That's why you lost," said. A week later, the Galactic Concord held an emergency meeting to discuss what had happened at Prime. Representatives from every member species gathered in the Great Hall, their bodies and faces showing every type of life the galaxy had produced. There was fear in that room. The other species had seen what humans could do. They had watched the battle footage. They had seen soldiers fighting with wounds that should have killed them. They had seen ships ramming into enemy vessels, sacrificing themselves without hesitation. They had seen the fire that burned inside human hearts. They were afraid. Ambassador spoke first. His crystalline body pulsed with strong light as he addressed the assembly. "I know what you are failing," he said. "I see the fear in your bodies. You have witnessed what the humans can do, and you wonder if you are safe. You wonder if these creatures who destroyed the fleet might one day turn against you." He moved to the center of the hall, his form catching the light and scattering it in rainbow patterns. "I was there when the humans came to our world. I watched them tear up our gardens to build defenses. I watched them turn our peaceful cities into fortresses. I was angry. I was confused. I did not understand why they would destroy beauty to create ugliness." He paused, letting his words settle. "But then I understood. They were not destroying our world. They were saving it. They sacrificed our gardens so that our children would live. They built walls so that our families would have shelter. They fought and bled and died so that we would survive." Turned to face the human delegation. Daniel Cole sat there in his dress uniform, a patch covering the eye he had lost in the fighting. Beside him sat Laura Griffin, now a full commander, with scars on her hands that she would carry for life. Behind them were the surviving officers and soldiers who had fought at Prime. "Look at them," said to the assembly. "Look at their wounds, look at their scars, look at what they gave for us." His voice rose, strong and clear. 40 years ago, my people saved humanity from a plague. We did it because we believed all life was precious. We asked for nothing in return." He moved closer to the human delegation. "Today, humanity paid that debt. They paid it with their blood. They paid it with their pain. They paid it with the lives of their sons and daughters." He bowed his crystal body low. "I am honored to call them friends. I am honored to stand beside them, and I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for what they did." The hall was silent. Then slowly the representatives began to rise. One by one, species by species, they stood and faced the human delegation. They were still afraid. Fear does not vanish in a moment, but alongside the fear there was something else now. Respect. Daniel Cole stood and faced the assembly. His voice was quiet but carried through the hall. "We didn't come here for respect," he said. "We didn't fight for glory or power or territory. We fought because friends were in danger and we could help. That's what humans do. We protect the people we care about, no matter the cost." He looked at the crystal being who had welcomed humanity into the stars. "The debt is paid," Daniel said, "but the friendship continues. From now until the stars go dark, humanity will stand with those who stand with us. That is our promise. That is our way." Outside the great hall, the galaxy turned on, vast and cold and dangerous. There were other threats out there, other enemies who might one day come. But the species of the conquered were no longer alone. They had protectors now. They had the humans. And they had learned the most important lesson of all. When humanity paid their debts, they paid them in fire, and that fire would burn forever.